Hello my friends, my name is Lindsay. I run the blog Books for Christian Girls, and welcome back to the little corner of the internet where I talk mainly about Christian fiction and clean fiction. Today is my May wrap-up, my recent reads, number 5 of the year. We have a lot of books to talk about. I have a lot of clean fiction, I have a lot of Christian fiction. 15 of them were actually off of Kindle Unlimited. I had 5 off of my physical TBR, which could have been better, but I'll take what I can get. And then another 5 off of my priority list that I have showed y'all from my reading journal. So a total of 25 books, and some of them were duds. I will say I have a couple here that I won't be rating, and I'll be talking about why I've decided not to rate those. I've got a few other duds, and then I also have some highly anticipated books, like 3 of my most anticipated books from the year released in May, and so we get to talk about those, so that's very exciting. I had some really good winners. I also had a couple nostalgic reads, so let's get started. Because this is such a long video, and like with all my other videos, I have timestamps down below, so if you just want to skip around to whatever books interest you, that is so okay. I have full content reviews down below as well in the description, and we're going to have my little ad breaks that I introduced in my last recent reads, because that is working, I think, pretty well, so thank you all for your feedback on that, and let's get started. So the first book for Christian fiction is one I will not be rating, and that is A Moment That Sparked Affinity by Dannica May Howell. This was a harder one for me to read and review for different reasons, and I don't want to discourage the author with my review, so I hope I gave enough positives, because I think there is great potential, but for me this story just wasn't my cup of tea, and I decided not to rate it because there was cursing and just kind of crude language, and for me personally, I don't want to read books that have quite a bit of that, even if it's done by like the villain and it's looked upon as wrong, because I still read those words, or if it's an audiobook I hear those words, and if it's an audiobook that cusses I turn it off. But when it comes to reading it, it still kind of like lingers in my brain, and there's a higher chance of those words coming out of my mouth, and they weren't nice uplifting words, so I didn't care for that aspect. The point of this book, though, was that Melody is the female main character, and I struggle with that because we have a really interesting kind of sci-fi alternate universe contemporary setting. It was very different, and the main girl, though, she bumps into this guy at her mom's art show, and they start talking, and one of the paintings they see looks just like them, and so they are trying to figure out answers for this anonymous painting that happened in like the 15th century. And so that's the chapter 1, and then chapter 2, very similar events happen, same with chapter 3, and then we start getting more answers as the book continues. I would be curious to see like fans of like sci-fi books or just like alternative universe, those who read that genre more, what y'all would think of this book. For me, it just really wasn't my cup of tea. My next book is a new release historical Christian fiction, and that is The Angel of Second Street by Barbara Tifft Blakely. I ended up giving this one 2 stars for a few different reasons, but basically our main girl is Ida, I think is how we pronounce her name, and she is 17 years old, so it really did feel more like historical YA, which was interesting. It did not have the feel of a very typical Christian fiction historical novel, but she has grown up very privileged thanks to living with her aunt and uncle, and she has a heart for witnessing to the prostitutes on 2nd Street in her town. And of course everyone's just like, no, you're not supposed to go over there, leave them alone, that kind of thing. And she notices the hypocrisy, really, because her church members are willing to send barrels of clothing to missions and say overseas, but they're not willing to look at the people in their own town that need Jesus. And so I liked that message of it. The problem with Ida, her heart was in the right place, but unfortunately logic was not in that place, because her idea is to sneak out and dress like the prostitutes and go try to talk to them in the daytime. Yeah, that was not a great idea. Thankfully, it does not go as terribly as it could have. Like, it could have gone so wrong. And so her and her best friend, and her best friend's really just there for, like, the scandal, really. And so they try to go talk to the prostitutes about Jesus. And It doesn't go as she hopes or plans, and so that doesn't work. But she gets like a reverend kind of involved in the idea and the ministry and talking to him. But then side note, we have the main guy, and what was his name? His name was something. And so, do you hear my Daisy? She hasn't barked in a video in so long. Aw. The trash guys are running around, so that's what she's barking at. But so meanwhile, we have Blaine, and he's 24, and he has been praying to have a wife that would like help him honor the Lord and like want to, you know, go out and witness. If you're familiar with the pickup line that gets used more so nowadays, but like when a guy comes up to a girl and is like, oh, God told me you're my wife, he kind of does that, and she's taken aback, as she should be, but they end up being decently cute together. This was just interesting. The faith content was there, so I enjoyed that, but we do have a lot of prejudice towards the prostitutes and then also the Chinese workers. And that was difficult to read. The plotline was very simple, though, I would say, compared to other historical Christian fiction books I've read that has to do with prostitution. It was very lightly handled, so I think, like, if you didn't know what that was, this book wouldn't tell you what it is, but you would definitely have questions because it wouldn't make sense. And so there was one part that just kind of made me sad reading, was that there's a doctor and he hands out pills to the prostitutes, and one of them will take care of her problem. And the main girl doesn't really understand what that is, but as a reader, we can understand what that was and what just happened. And I just found that really sad that it wasn't commented upon negatively or frowned upon. It was just, this is the time, this is how it is, and I understand that happened, but I still think it was really sad for a Christian fiction book to just brush that under the rug for so many reasons, and I could continue ranting about that, but it's not a book I recommend, because while the main girl had a passion, she also had no tact or grace handling that, and just the ending was also very rushed and choppy, because something that's on the back cover does not happen till like the last 5%. So number one, the back cover was kind of a spoiler for that, and it ends in a very quick manner. It wasn't a bad story as a whole, but it's just, it just wasn't great in my opinion. And I feel like there's better ones out there. This next book I actually pre-ordered, and that was because I didn't think my library would get it, but they ended up getting it, so there went that. The Unlikely Intrusion of Adam's Klein by John Greco. Personally, I think this is just again of the case. It wasn't really my cup of tea. I wanted to try it because it's that kind of that upper middle grade, lower YA, so like 10 to 15 is what the publisher has on Amazon. And I think that's a really hard age range, personally, to market towards. This was interesting. Bottom line, not my cup of tea, so 2.5 stars. But it follows Adam's Klein, and he lives in Adams, plural. He lives in a futuristic, I think it was like 2196, and there is an evil dictator. And when that evil dictator is having dreams and nightmares and whatnot, that somebody is going to kill him, and because the technology is so advanced for that time period, they are able to find out the blood of the person that was going to kill them, and they've traced it to Adams's bloodline. Not necessarily that he's going to do it, but somebody in his bloodline is going to do it. And so they are trying to get rid of him. So his dad sends him back in time to 2015, and so he is hiding out in 2015, but he ends up rescuing a boy and a girl from drowning, and that shifts the time period and the future, because he's not supposed to mess with the future. So it was a very interesting concept. I think for me, it just felt a little bit like a boy book, and that sounds really weird, but that's the only way I really can think of explaining it, because like there's some comments or humor that would make a young boy laugh and probably not bother girls that have brothers, but for me, I was just like, okay. It just wasn't enjoyable in that part. It was interesting. I would potentially continue the rest of the series. I don't think I'll be buying them, but I thought I would try it. I would give a note though that for sensitive readers, especially like in that middle grade YA young age, like that 10 to 15 that the publisher is aiming this book for, I would suggest maybe not for sensitive readers, because the villain has a few moments where, like, you know, you can tell he's evil, and so, like, straight to the line on that. The Christianity content was different. The villain kind of has a story about the ones out there, like, representing gods and whatnot. And so it was interesting, because I actually put the whole paragraph that he talked about this in my review, because I really didn't know how to take it, because it was so kind of confusing. And this is a villain, and we see him, like, order a guy's vocal cords to be removed and for something else horrible to happen to this guy that spoke out against him. So he's not a good guy, but then he's talking about the ones out there. And so they were called gods, spirits, muses, angels, demons. The labels don't really matter. And so, like, everybody believed in them. And it was just interesting because he believes his dream was a warning from the ones out there. And I don't know, I thought that was very confusing. Because, like, the villain is claiming that, it was interesting. I would potentially read the rest of the series, because this book does end on a cliffhanger. And I'm trying to think, book 2 is releasing in the fall, like November, and then book 3 of the trilogy will be coming out in spring of 26. So I would potentially read it. I think for me, though, it just wasn't my thing. Again, boys would enjoy it, or girls that have brothers or, like, are fine with a little more of, like, that action sci-fi element. Y'all probably would be fine with it, but I grew up as a girly girl. I'm still a girly girl. It wasn't really my thing. So speaking of books that were outside of my comfort zone, Warsafe by Lauren Smyth. I gave this one around 3 stars. This one was really interesting because it had such video game vibes, and I'm not a video game player, so I think those that like video games would probably be much more interested in it. But basically, at first we are following like 3 different POVs, and then a 4th one is added in. And we follow this one girl, what was her name? Haley? Yeah, Haley, and she's 17. And she is living on this island. And there's this one building that she's not allowed to go to. There's kind of like a stigma, I guess you could say, about that and the people that live there. And her father, though, is the town doctor, so, like, he has some interaction with the people that come from that house, and they're always, like, beaten up and bloody and bruised and all that. And so she's, like, very confused about what's happening, and kind of is trying to figure it out and makes friends with a couple of the young adults there. And so we have that POV timeline, but then we also have Roscoe, I think is how we say her name, and she works for this video game company in Seattle. And she's supposed to, like, track down glitches and, like, do the, not the illustrations, the graphics and all of that. And so we have that. But then we also have this nerdy guy that enters in, what was his name? Andy. And he's a nerd, classified nerd. And so we have all of that. And then the storylines and the timelines combine. And it was very interesting. I think, though, again, not my cup of tea personally. It had really good potential, and I can totally see why I have friends that have raved about it and have really enjoyed it. For me, it just, I don't know. I'm not really a video game person or like a shoot 'em up video game person. I do Stardew Valley and Mario Kart. That's the extent of my video game knowledge right there. You know, the cute, cozy kind of games. This was more of the shoot 'em up, perhaps there's more happening than the characters know kind of vibe. I will say, even though it does have like that kind of video game violence, it never really was gory or super violent, because we're not following the main characters that are doing any killing. They are side characters, and our main characters are kind of like tagging along. Does that make sense? It's hard for me sometimes to tell about books, because I've got all the context in my brain about a book, but then I wonder when I tell it to y'all, did that just make no sense because you have no context for the book if you haven't read it? I feel like that might be the case with this, so I apologize if it's not really making sense. It's not necessarily a sci-fi book. It's fantasy, but also contemporary, but then there are some, I think you could say, sci-fi elements, maybe? I'm not quite Sure. It was different. I think if you really like video games or just that aesthetic, you might give it a try. I appreciated that it wasn't violent or like super violent or anything like that, because this book didn't feel heavy, which was something I was a little leery of going into. So it had some positives for me, but I think overall it wasn't my cup of tea. I read a Christian fiction dystopian YA book, and that is Recruit of Talionis, I think is how we pronounce it, by CJ Milacci. I don't think that's right. I'm sorry. I don't know why I am so bad at names and pronouncing them. I just am. And I'd love to improve that. But the phonetic stuff just has never been my strong suit, so I apologize. But this follows, what was her name? Bria. And Bria is abducted. Well, let's go back. Okay, so Bria lives with her parents, her aunt, 2 younger brothers, and then she had another brother that passed away. So it does deal with sibling grief. So heads up on that. And so our main girl is still trying to deal with all the emotions of that. And then she is abducted and put into a facility for becoming the government's soldiers. Dystopian plotline. I will say I found this book to be a little predictable, but I have read a lot of dystopian books. That's one of my favorite genres, and I've been waiting to read this series until the last book releases, and the last book is releasing in the fall, so I'm hoping maybe I can get the rest of the series done in between there. And I liked it. I thought it was a very kind of typical first book for a dystopian series, because there is a lot of setting the stage and introducing the characters and all of that. There is a lot of near-death moments and a lot of fighting and killing, but it never felt super gruesome or violent, so I appreciate that. There's enough to know what's going on and the reactions from her, but I would say it was very much on the cleaner side for a dystopian book that does feature a lot of deaths and fighting and killing and, you know, that kind of thing that's very typical for a dystopian plotline. Like, that's, you could argue that's basically mandatory for a dystopian plotline. And so I would say, though, even though the book was on the longer side, I'm trying to think how many pages. Yeah, 450 pages, which is another reason I've been holding off on this series, because that, as soon as a book hits 400 pages, I start going, do I really need to read that? That's long. That's going to take a couple days. Do I really need to? But I finally read it. I'm trying to think what else I can say. It's basically, you know, setting the stage for the rest of the series and the events that are going to come. I don't know. I read a dystopian book and I want that justice quick. I want to see evil defeated, so I'm going to have to wait with this series for that. So that's kind of a bummer. But here I am, reading the series anyway. I can't really think of how else to say it besides setting the stage, because we are being introduced to the characters and the world, and how there are things happening that aren't being shared as in a dystopian book it goes. There was a lot of things I did like about it. I mainly, though, just want to see justice and evil defeated and good win, but apparently I'm going to have to wait a while for that, which is a bummer. That's a bummer, but I'm curious. I'll probably read book 2 here in June, and we'll continue on with the series. I do want to note, though, that even though this was 450 pages, I did not have a lot of content to note. Like, looking at my review, it was honestly, that's a shorter review. For that page length, that was very impressive. So that kind of tells you also that it is on the cleaner side. The romance, I'm still suspicious of. It sounds like it's going to be very slow burn, which is good, because I'm not sure about the male love interest. We only follow the main girl and her first person POV. We'll see. We'll see about the main guy. I'm holding my judgment on him. I did think it was funny, and I really need to make this a rule for myself. That I need to read a dystopian book like one a month, because that would keep me in shape, because every dystopian book I read makes me want to exercise and work out and become all like fit and whatnot, because you never know when you're going to have to take down a corrupt government. And so I really need to just like add that to my reading schedule, because then I'll want to work out and exercise, and that's good for me. So this book did do that. It did make me want to exercise and get on my little walking pad and whatnot. So there's that. But as far as like the Christian faith content, that was actually stronger than I was expecting. And I have to note that I really liked that the author had the actual names for God and Jesus. There wasn't like a allegorical thing or like a fantasy made up name or anything like that. It is the actual names of God and Jesus. So I really have to commend the author for doing that, because there is a straight shot, straight path salvation methods in this book. So I did really appreciate that. And I thought that was, and I think people would call it heavy-handed, and I would maybe slightly agree, but at the same time, I loved seeing it. So it's not really a negative in my eyes. Overall, it's not a new favorite dystopian book, but it's hard to compete against the ones that are my favorites. So I enjoyed it well enough. I'm going to continue on with the series, and we will see what my thoughts go as I continue it. My next book that I read in May was Mary Elizabeth, Welcome to America by Eleanor Clark, and I gave this one 3.5 stars. This is Christian fiction, middle grade historical, mostly. It basically starts off where we are getting this young girl, what was her name? Jennifer Jean, who is 11, and she is being kind of forced to go to her grandmother's with all her other cousins and have like a tea party with their dolls, and she thinks she's too old to be doing that, and like life has changed a lot with her parents have announced they're getting a divorce, and so she's not really thrilled about anything. And so we just see her POV for the prologue and the epilogue, but the main part of the book, the middle of the book, the entirety of the book really, is a story that her grandmother is telling her and her cousins about, and it's following Mary Elizabeth, who lives in 1635 and is coming over to America from, I think it was England, it could have been Wales. It's somewhere in that area, because they are being persecuted for their faith. And so it's like the story of Mary Elizabeth learning perseverance as they go on the boat, are on the boat for a long time, and then eventually they dock on land and they start building and learning about their new home. And so I think you could compare it a lot to the American Girl original historical books, or even the Sisters in Time series. I think it had more of a lesson than the American Girl books, but it wasn't as boring as the Sisters in Time series. I'm sorry, I know so many people love the Sisters in Time series. I was not personally impressed. They are fully reviewed on BFCG. They were fine. I wasn't impressed with that. So I would say this one felt very like a wholesome version. Like compared to the two, I thought it was very wholesome. There's the good lesson of learning perseverance, and there is some faith content. The main character though, her and her family do see slaves being forced to board the ship that they're on, and she's very upset and distraught about that. So like, just as a heads up for those who are looking for books for their middle grade readers or preteen readers, there is a conversation. It's written in my review, just so y'all can be aware of it. I thought it was handled pretty well, as best as it could for that time period. So yeah, there is that part. I think overall though, I did really like this book. I look forward to continuing the rest of the series. It's actually all available on Kindle Unlimited, which was a very nice surprise and why I decided to read these. I've never really been interested in the 1600s time period. That's just never been one that catches my attention for, I guess, different reasons. But I thought it was very interesting to learn about the time period and just have like the view of it from a 10-year-old girl. So I look forward to reading the rest of the series, and of course I will be reviewing them and y'all will hear about them. Okay, this next book I have very mixed feelings on, and that is The Burning of Rosemont Abbey by Naomi Steffens. I ended up giving this book 3.5 stars. It was really looking like it was going to be a 4, but once the book ended, I had to drop it just a little bit. I did not love the ending, but basically this is set in 1956, and like somewhere in the UK, I don't remember where, but our main girl is Louisa, and she is a twin, and her brother, even though they have a very strained relationship, especially as of late, she feels at the very beginning of the book that her brother has died. And it's kind of like that twin connection thing. And so she feels that. And then they find out the Abbey that their father, their late father, used to be the Reverend at, is on fire. And so he is being blamed that he set the church on fire, the Abbey on fire. And she's determined to prove that it was not him because she felt him die prior. And of course you can't really tell anyone that because they'll think she's crazy, especially in the 1950s. And so she's trying to prove what happened to her brother, what happened to the fire. And so we have that mystery element. But before you get excited about it, there is murder. There is murder. So heads up for that. I would say this book almost had like a Agatha Christie or the Clue Game or even Murder, She Wrote kind of style, because you have the British setting, a girl who, how old was she? Like 26. Okay, she was 26. And it's only told in her POV. And she's trying to solve both of these mysteries. There's some danger. There's a handsome former friend officer who is now come back as the, what is his title? Like a detective, inspector, detective, something like that. And so he's kind of helping her, but she has a lot of moments of all the different suspects. And I had my theories on who it was, but I have to say I was really disappointed with the ending. And so that affected my rating. I had an inkling it could be that person, but I pushed it away because I didn't want it to be that person. And then it is that person, and I was disappointed. And it kind of felt far-fetched in a way. I don't know. So we talk about on my channel pretty often how I would love to see more non-murder mysteries. Well, this book obviously has murder, so it doesn't cover that. But if we're gonna have murder or non-murder either way, I would really prefer in Christian fiction to not see affairs. And I feel like that's a really easy cop-out or easy motivation. I feel like if we can be a little more inventive, it's more enjoyable. I'm kind of tired of seeing that. So like there are mentions of affairs in this one. There is also a ton of mentions of smoking and drinking. And basically every side character does one or both on page. And that was just kind of annoying to me. And I know it's of the time period, and so it makes sense. But like it was a lot. It was a lot of smoking and drinking for the side characters. So that was a bummer. There were two side characters I really, really liked though, and that was the vicar and then what was her name? Mrs. Watson. They kind of become Louisa's sidekicks to help solve the mystery, and so they were great. I want them to have their own series because they were so much fun. They added a humor to a book that could have felt very sad. Now, on the sadness note, the main girl is trying to figure out what happened to her brother, so there is sibling grief, and it is heavy towards the end. So I honestly left this book feeling really sad because I've experienced that myself. And so that was hard personally to read about. Maybe if you haven't experienced that kind of loss, then you may not be affected by it. But I did cry at the end. I cried at the end for sure. And it's hard. I have really mixed feelings about this book because it started off really interesting, but as the book continued and as things were revealed, I just didn't enjoy it as much. So I'm still debating, will I get a copy? Because like 3.5 stars, if I own the book, I'll probably keep it. But 3.5 stars to buy the book? I don't usually, unless it's part of a series. So I don't know. It doesn't seem like it's part of a series. I enjoyed elements of it. I can totally see why I have different friends who just love this book, and I thought it was a very interesting plotline, and it started out really strong. But there were different things here and there I didn't personally care for. It was very interesting. I enjoyed trying to figure things out. There was just some negatives in it for me though as well. So 3.5 stars. I would read more books by this author for sure, especially if it follows in like the same mystery 1950s setting. But yeah, mixed thoughts on this book overall. Golly, this is a good floppy book. Wow, look at how floppy that is. That is nice. I like that. So Royal Redemption by Melody Carlson, I gave 3.5 stars as well. This is book 2 in the Princess Wars duology. So book 1 was A Royal Quest, and this is book 2 of Royal Redemption. And I talked about this in a recent video, which was the underrated book recommendations video, because this is actually One series I don't see many people talk about, but it also, what was neat about it is it's fantasy in like a medieval setting-ish. Like fake world, no real names are used for actual countries or whatever. But there's no magic or fantasy elements elsewise. And then it's not a fairy tale retelling, just in case. I talk about a lot of fairy tale retellings. I know, this is not one. This is just like princessy vibes, I guess you could say. Because we followed twin princesses and there was only one crown, so how is that going to work out? So our main girl was Heather in book 1, and she is like the oldest. She is very logical choice for it. She has a good head on her shoulders. But then we have Princess Rose, and Princess Rose is a character that makes you want to bang your head into a wall. And this author writes that, she writes that kind of character so well. I've been reading Melody Carlson books for longer than I've been doing BFCG. So that's saying something. I think she was one of the very first, if not the very first, Christian fiction author I found via my library. And there, a lot of times in her YA books, you are going to have a character that just makes you go crazy until you get that character redemption or just character arc. And that was the case with Rose in this book. So we do get that, and she tries to prove herself to her sister that she is better and loyal and trying to do better in general. So I can't really tell you too much more because it is book 2 and it was a duology. I do think it ended maybe a touch rushed, and I would have liked an epilogue, but it wasn't really needed. It overall was an entertaining series, pretty clean, and good floppy book. Wow, that's a good floppy book. Nothing really else to note about this one. I enjoyed it. I'm going to keep it. Yeah, overall pretty good. As far as like an age range for this one, I would say like 14 plus maybe. There is light romance elements. There is some like peril and harrowing events, but nothing really major, so feel free to check out my review though. For a cozy mystery book, I read Wolves in Sheep's Clothing by Sandra Orchard. This is book 9? Yes, book 9 in the Mysteries of the Cobble Hill Farm series, which I've been talking to y'all about for the last about 9 months. And I have to say, I think this is a new favorite of the series. I really like Sandra Orchard's books regardless, but there's really good developments in this book for the very light romance that is coming in. And so we follow Harriet throughout this whole series. She is a vet that has inherited her grandfather's veterinary clinic in Yorkshire, England. And so she's there, she is, oh, what's the word? Oh, that's a good floppy book too. Ooh, nice. Okay. But basically, like, she's getting more comfortable, she's meeting more people, and more people are trusting her. And so a lot of different sheep are going missing in the area, and they're trying to figure out what's going on with that. It's cozy mystery, no murder. There is more romance in this book than any of the prior books, because her and a certain fella are officially dating, and they are adorable together. They really are adorable. I think they're so cute. I can't wait to read the rest of the series. It is light. It is making me think, though, like the prior books in the series were overall okay, I think, for like 12, 13-year-olds. But now this one is introducing a bit of romance, and it's light. Don't get me wrong. It's light, but like there is some feelings there. So it's really going to depend on the girl and the family now from here as the series continued. But I would say this was definitely a favorite of the series for me. So far, we will see how it continues, but it was really cute. And this book made me want Yorkshire pudding, which honestly, since becoming plant-based vegan almost 10 years ago, 9 years ago, something like that, that is the only thing I miss, is my mom's Yorkshire pudding, because, oh, it was so good. And then it also made me want a baby doll sheep. What was the... Yeah, the baby doll variety. I want one of those. Look how cute it is. That's from Google, but like, look how cute. So cute. So, yes, I was hungry and I wanted to pet cute little sheep. That's all I wanted to do while reading this book. And then I was squealing and squealing over just like the lightest little romance details. So, and then my last book for Christian fiction is one of my most anticipated releases for the year, and that is A Lesson in Propriety by Jen Turano. The amount of times I've had my mom say this title and let me repeat it back to her, I think she's done it like 28 times. And I've only gotten it once. This is not gonna go well for me, I can already tell. It was really cute though. It was an easy peasy 4-star book. This is the start of Jen Turano's new series, The Merryweather Academy for Young Ladies. I'm so excited. I love academy, boarding school type plot lines. Just sign me up. And then with Jen Turano, it is always just like a fun historical romp, if you will, because there's a humor and just like all the antics their characters get into. You really have to read her books, I think, when you're just in a mood for something light and maybe silly, but like silly in a good way. And I thought this book was definitely that. So we follow Drusilla. Drusilla? I think that's how we say her name. I think of the Cinderella stepsisters with that name. But her life has completely changed because not only has her father recently passed away and their entire like money inheritance been stolen, her fiance also breaks up with her. And that was the opening scene, and I'm just laughing. I haven't tabbed my copy yet, but I think I will, because with Jen Turano's books, I just like laugh out loud, literally. And so she gets the idea that after finding out she's inherited a property from her aunt, that she is going to go open a boarding school for young ladies. And that just starts it off. So that's in Chicago. So they moved from New York City to Chicago. And she meets our main guy. And our main guy is Winrick. It looks like a cool name. I just can't pronounce it, which, you know, that's half of the names out there. But he is the oldest, I think. Yes, he's the oldest of 5 and has 4 younger sisters. And he was just great. He was great. I loved seeing his sisters and just their big family dynamics, the sibling dynamics, just the cute humor that came from them, and how much you can tell, like, he's very protective of them, but you can also see how much they have influenced him and just made him a good guy. He is just a good guy, and he was just so fun. Solid male lead. There is very light faith content. There's not really much, which seems to be the current trend for Jen Turano's books. But it was natural for the plotline, I suppose. And just overall, I really enjoyed this one. I anticipated release was a success. Very fun. Cannot wait for the rest of the series, of course, because I already know this is going to be such a fun series. There was actually a slight mystery and a bit of suspense throughout this book, which is different for Jen Turano's books. But I ended up really enjoying that, and it kept me on my toes as I was reading. And, you know, I just like boarding school academy plot lines anyway, so I was gonna like that part. But then you've got the main characters and then her sister and then her friend that have also come, and they're obviously going to be getting their own books that I can't wait to read. So this is good. I really enjoyed this one. So that was the Christian fiction section of this video. Now we have clean fiction, and actually there's probably more clean fiction than I had Christian fiction, but we're going to go through some of these faster. Okay, I'm going to stand up for a minute because I'm tired of sitting. So my first book for the clean fiction category is Amphibian's Kiss by Lichelle. I'm thinking it rhymes with Michelle. I have no idea if that's right. That's what my brain's telling me. My brain's been wrong before, so who knows. By Lichelle Slater, though. And I really, really liked the writing style of this book. And I was interested in this book mainly because the little blurb, the back cover, if you will, says she has a pet hedgehog. And I was very excited about that. And so I decided to read it. But I will say I'm not rating this one because I'm very leery about books with like witches or showing witches in a positive light, and our main girl is a witch, and I wasn't quite sure. Like, I kind of was thinking that based off of the cover, but I was like, maybe not. Maybe people just think she is. But no, she is, and as the book continues, there's more about, like, that and, like, writing things on the floor and, like, creating enchanted items. So that was uncomfortable personally to me, so I've decided not to rate this book. It should be noted, though, like, the main girl works with good magic as opposed to like dark magic that like hurts people. So there is that aspect, but I don't like the word witch being used personally. So yeah, that was kind of a bummer. There was a lot of positives, but like that made me go, you know, I'm not gonna rate it because I'm very leery about that kind of plot line, and I don't really like seeing that kind of character. I will say I really liked the writing style, and like the pacing of the book was really well done. There is a love triangle, which was a little stressful. And looking at reviews, it's pretty split on who should have won. I'm not really thinking there should have been a winner of that love triangle. I think there needed to be some character development between the potential love interest and the main character first. I will say there was a few maybe cruder comments or suggestions than I preferred as well, so I decided not to rate it because of that and the witch content. So yeah, there's that. Kind of a bummer, but I tried. So last month I reviewed book 1 in this series, but this time I've read book 2, and that was The Midnight Heiress by Ashtyn Newbold. This is Once Upon a Regency series, which is like a collection of 5 clean fiction fairy tale retellings that are set in a Regency time period. And so I was really excited for this one though because it was a reverse Cinderella retelling, but unfortunately I'm giving it 2 stars because the execution of it was kind of lackluster. And I think I realized while reading this book why there wasn't more reverse Cinderella retellings out there in the market that at least I've seen. Because Cinderella, as a general rule, is usually like meek and mild and always caving into her stepfamily's like demands and wishes. And so when you have a main guy that's like that, it's not really swoon worthy, right? I think the author did really well though trying to keep him from coming across that way, because he was constantly remembering like the words from his late mother about like being kind to everyone and showing kindness. So it worked, but it also gave him that he's a lover, not a fighter kind of style of a guy, if you will. And so there was that. It was very rushed because it's only 150 pages. They fall for each other very quick. Love confessions happen. The ball starts. It worked, I guess. It just kind of felt a little bit like a soap opera at times. Our Princess Charming, though, had understandable parents and good parents, so that helped a lot. I don't know. It was fine. It was okay. That's usually what a 2-star means, is it was okay in my eyes. I had higher hopes for it, so that was disappointing. I just had a coughing fit. I'm so sorry. I am fighting off something still. I don't know if it's allergies or a cold or what. So I'm not 100% today. I feel very tired and winded. We're about halfway through this video though. We can keep on going. My next book is going to be All the Pretty Places by Joy Callaway. Obviously, we can all tell what attracted me to this book. The cover, obviously. So I listened to this one as an audiobook, and it was very different than I was expecting. I was pleasantly surprised that there was a lot about flowers and plants and gardening and getting your hands in the dirt, which I was not expecting, because all the other gardening themed books I've read really don't do that. It's just there for the vibes and the aesthetics. So I was just pleasantly surprised by that. And so I listened to the audiobook while I was gardening myself, and the narrator did not make the book better, I will say that. I would say this book was pretty slow and kind of tedious at times, partially because of the writing style, also because of the narrator, but just also how it was written. There was a lot of things that were like recapped or re-explained, and the book's like a normal length book. I don't really think we need to recap things that much. The main girl could be dramatic at times, and that did not endear her to me. I wrote quite a few thoughts about this book on Goodreads, so if you would like to have some of my rants, I'll direct you that way. Sadie had moments where she leaned more to the feminist side, but I think it was honestly more along the lines of she was just before her time. She wanted to inherit her father's garden nursery place, and he would not consider her because she was a girl, and that was not what was expected for women of that time, because this is like 1893. So there you go. So yeah, not really a thing. She did have her moments where she thought she was better than others that went with like the traditional roles of marriage and motherhood, and thankfully she calmed down about that by the end. But the main guy, they had some stupid moments. Okay, let's just put it that way. They had some moments where I was like, this is gonna blow up in your face. Oh, and look, it does. It did. It totally did. Poof. Yeah, completely. I don't think the main couple were the healthiest for each other. They have their stupid moments, they have their arguments, but they're fighting attraction and passion for each other. And they didn't feel like a healthy, good foundation relationship. It wasn't necessarily like the forbidden love. It was the forbidden love trope, but it wasn't really like they loved each other because of the taste of the unforbidden thing. It wasn't really that. It was just the societal roles that were different and the places in society and that kind of thing. I mean, overall, it was pretty clean. Let's just put it that way. Overall, it was clean. The D word is used once, and then God's name is indirectly taken in vain, I guess you could say. There were a couple kisses that were a little much, and I was probably blushing as much as my cherry tomatoes were that I was pruning. So that's fun. And one of them had tongue. So yeah, it was gross. Can we... I don't know. Okay, if I ever became president, which I'm not going to run, obviously, because, I got gray hair now. I'd have a whole head of it by the end of that time. But no, if I did, we're banning tongue and kisses in books. New rule. Executive order, let me sign that kind of thing. Because that was just... And just to listen to it, I was like, you know, like that's... I'm deciding with audiobooks, they really need to be middle grade or like classic books. Where I don't have romance feelings in my ear and just like feeling scandalized. Like I'm a mother in the Regency time period kind of thing. There's that. Overall, it was decently clean. I don't really think it was worth your time though. I really don't. Even though I love the Gilded Age. It was okay. It was okay. Okay, my bad. I just totally said to y'all that last month I talked about that clean Regency series. No, that I actually started it this month. Here's book 1. So sorry about that. They are standalones. I don't think they're going to be connecting in any way. I don't think they're connected to any other books. So, sorry about that. The first book is The Fairest Heart by Heather Chapman. I actually liked this one more. This is a Snow White retelling. I gave 3 stars. So this is a Snow White retelling where instead of an evil stepmother, it is an evil aunt. And I actually found that very refreshing to have a difference about that. And I actually liked that quite a bit. I will say for the main couple, it was kind of insta-love. But they were really cute. So, and they were so smitten with each other, and it's only 150 pages. So, like, I can't complain. If I like the couple, I'm not going to complain about insta-love. I am going to note it, but I'm not going to complain about it. And they were just really cute, which made me just happy because they're so smitten. I love seeing smitten couples. The thing is, I really enjoyed the book for the majority of it, and then there was a really stupid event at the end of the book that made me so mad that I ripped a star away. In my rating. I was going to give it 4 stars. But then that stupid event happened and I was just like, are you kidding me? And so it's down to 3. Am I petty? Yes. It was really good until that ending. Overall, it was still good. But like that little ending angst was just annoying. Annoyed me to pieces. Somebody became a fool when he was not a fool for the rest of the book. And so, yeah. I was disappointed about that. I don't know if I'd buy a physical copy of it because, again, I was very annoyed at what he did. So, maybe, maybe not. I would check out other books by this author, though, for sure. Okay, I do know for a fact I've read the first 2 books in this series last month, and so Pearl of Magic is book 3 in the Fairy Tale Royals series by Emily Deddy. This is on my, not my anticipated releases, no, my, what's the, summer TBR list, a video that I made last month. I've read 2 off of there for May, and so far in June I've read another 2, but I'm reading the 3rd one today, so I'm making progress. Go me. I'm excited. So, Pearl of Magic, though, by Emily Deddy. This is a Little Mermaid retelling, but it was a very unique, kind of just had the, I won't say had the ambiance, but basically in this world, there is, 250 years ago, all the magic users were banished and, like, exiled to this one island. And they are going to be able to get out 250 years later. Well, that time is approaching. And so the royal families of this continent have been trying to come up and be able to defend themselves against magic because they're not magic users. And so they're trying to figure that all out. But here comes our main girl in this book. I can't remember, what was her name? Oh, this is the one with her name was actually said how to pronounce it in the book, which, appreciate that so much. Izel. Okay, her name is Izel, I think is how we're going to pronounce that. And so she is actually a magic user that has been raised on that island where all the magic users have been vanquished. And so what she knows and what the main guy knows, very, very different things. So there is some confusion because of that. But as like they talk about, well, here's the thing. She gets off of her island and because of the special little jeweled necklace she has to wear, she can't talk. You know, Little Mermaid can't talk. And so They end up getting to meet. She rescues him, as the Little Mermaid does. And then, because she is a magic user, though, she has to be taken to this other country that knows how to kind of deal with them. And so he is the one that gets to take her, even though he's like the fourth son, I think, of... Was he the fourth son? He was the third or fourth son of his royal family. And so he takes her, and eventually they get to have some conversations through different ways. And once things are like compared about like, oh no, this is what's happening here. You mean it's not this? No, it's like this kind of thing. Once we get that, things clear up, but it took a bit to get there. So just like, I was kind of confused until like 70% of the book, but I just went with it. The characters they understood. I didn't, but they understood, so I was trusting them. We got to see the couple from the first book in the series, which I was excited for because they are my favorite of the series so far. And then this is actually happening at the same time that book 2 is happening, which I thought was very interesting, but also very smart on the author's part, because basically they have 12 months, let's say. I think they called it 4 seasons. I think it's been 1,000 seasons or 250 years, so yeah, 4 seasons until the magic users are able to like leave that island and like cause havoc and whatnot. And like, you know, take revenge and all that. So book 2 and 3 are happening at the same time, which I thought was very smart, because you have to have like, you know, they have to fall in love. They've got to solve their adventure. And so this is happening at the same time. I gave this one about 3 stars. I enjoyed it. I look forward to reading book 4, and then book 5 is releasing in August. So gonna continue on with the series. It's been pretty good so far. Also, on the clean fairy tale retelling side, I'm still reading my fairy tale retellings. I think I've slowed up a little bit, but I'm still reading them for sure. One of them I read though was Second Star to the Right by Sarah Baran. This, I don't know if this was her very first book or just like one of the very first ones, but it's part of her series, The Order of the Fountain. And I've been told prior to reading this series that it is different than all of her other books. So like Chords of Green and Gold, that series, and then the Seasons of Music and Magic series, which I greatly enjoyed both of those series, and I've been talking about them. It's very different. This one has maybe a more serious note. There's still some humor thrown in, but it's more, I'm not quite sure the right word. I feel like the other books are maybe on the more cozy fantasy side, even though they might deal with a harder topic here or there. It's more on the cozy, whimsical side, if you will, while this series is not, and I'm definitely seeing that. The first part of this book is actually really sad, so like brace yourself, maybe have tissues if you're a sensitive soul, because it's a Peter Pan retelling, and that's apparently a requirement. Peter Pan retellings have to be sad, and honestly that fits for, I think this is number 3 or 4 Peter Pan retellings I've read in the last year or two. That fits. They're all sad. And the interesting part, though, about this book was that he has to deal with pirates, obviously, because, you know, Captain Hook and all that. But the names were different. The names threw me, because I was like, oh no, that doesn't fit. And I thought that was very ingenious of the author. And so interesting, though, about this is that it's obviously set mostly on a pirate ship. Our Peter Pan character has been basically kidnapped by pirates because of reasons that you figure out, but like he doesn't know, so there's that. The pirates aren't good, okay? And you might be like, Lindsay, they're pirates. They're not supposed to be good. I know that. But do you know how many times I see the pirate lifestyle romanticized? It gets romanticized a lot. So it was really nice, actually, even though it was like a little much for my stomach at times, that the pirates were evil. Because, you know, yeah, they were. It's kind of like how Bonnie and Clyde are romanticized so often in the media, where it's like, no, they weren't good people, y'all. They weren't good people. So I kind of, you know, just had to side note that. That's a really random note, but I just had to side note that I liked that the pirates were bad. Even though I didn't like the pirates, I liked that they were bad, because they were pirates. They are supposed to be bad. I will say my favorite character was Tink. I'm not going to say anything else. I liked Tink, though. She was cute. We don't meet our princess or like the female main character till about 70 pages in, and this book is just over 200 pages. So I can't say I really felt the romance element, but it was overall cute. I'm going to continue on with the series, just not a new favorite by this author. Next, I have 3 books of a series, and I actually liked the first book the most, but I'm just going to order them 1, 2, 3. Because that makes the most sense. And so book 1 was Ella and the Elf, and it's by Annabelle Raven. This is the Elves and Legends series. I gave this one 4 stars. This is a reimagining of Cinderella. And I think it should be noted that even though I've been reading a lot of like fantasy and fairy tale retellings, I don't think I'm a big fan, at least not yet, of the whole elves-human couple relationship kind of concept. I think it's usually because like the elf is really old and the human is really young, but somehow it always works out that it's like, oh no, that's basically the same equivalent based off of like how long an elf lives and all that kind of thing. But I was enticed by this book because it's a Cinderella retelling. And yeah, I like Cinderella retellings. This wasn't necessarily, though, a Cinderella retelling. It just had elements of the Cinderella story, and it's a very unique fantasy world where you have the human kingdom, and then there is the elf kingdoms. So our main girl is Ella, and one day she happens upon this elf prince fixing to be sold to the human king because of their magical elf blood. And so she is able to put a stop to it and rescues the guy. And then multiple years later, time has passed, her father has died, as Cinderella does, and her stepmother has sold her to be a slave for the elves. And so she's not treated well because she is a human in the elf world, and they kind of just treat humans as like their pets, slaves, and like can cause them pain. So she's going through all of that. But I will say I thought they were pretty cute together. She was a little hard-headed and stubborn and wanted to handle things her own when she was completely out of her wheelhouse in multiple ways. So he had to come in, and there were some cheesy lines. I will admit, there were some cheesy lines. But overall, I thought this one was cute. I thought it was cute. So I went on with the second book in the series, and that was Marian and the Elf. This is a reimagining of Robin Hood, and our main guy is the Robin Hood character. But talking about pirates again, he is a pirate, but he's a good pirate. He's a good pirate, so it kind of does romanticize the lifestyle a little bit because he's a good one. And I don't know, I gave this one 3 stars. I didn't like it as much. I did read them back to back though, and I think that maybe affected things because the characters felt very similar to the characters from the first book. And especially Robin, because he was kind of like sappy, romantic, poetic, and the main guy in the first book had parts of that as well. So I did find my eyes rolling just a few times because of that. It was fine. I mean, to continue on with the series, it was fine. I liked it enough. I gave it 3 stars. It wasn't very memorable, I guess you could say. But I did recently read the 3rd book in the series. I took a break from the series because I was like, I think I might be getting a little burnt out. So last week I did pick up Nolan and the Elf, which is on my summer TBR list. And so I gave that one 3.5 stars. This is a reimagining of Little Red Riding Hood, but it's kind of gender swapped. And I've learned Little Red Riding Hood stories kind of make me nervous because of the wolf element. Because usually it's got like that shapeshifter romance or wolf shifter, whatever you want to call it, that element. And I'm not a big fan of that, but because the main girl in this one was the elf and she had the ability to shift into a wolf, it bothered me a little less. It's still not a favorite, but it bothered me a little less. It's not really a retelling though. It just kind of had nods and elements of it overall. I will note though that the main character Soleil has anxiety, and that is very much on page, so I think that could potentially be hard or even potentially triggering for different readers to read, especially if you struggle with that as well. So it was good to see her open up to the main guy. I didn't really love them in general. They were a little googly eyes for each other, if you will. It was fine. It was really nice though to see that the male main character was adopted, and like his family was great. He loved his family, the family loved him, because that's a rarity in fiction. I have to say, that is an unfortunate rarity. There's always like somebody's got hidden motives, or they don't really like him and they mistreat him, or he resents them for whatever, and I'm tired of that. So it was really nice to see a happy family, especially that had an adoption connection. So it was refreshing in that regard. I did like that better, and I probably, had I read this one closer to the second book, I probably would have picked up on some plot twists. I did not. I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Okay, I remember that from the second book, but I didn't really pick up on it. So yeah, overall it was pretty good. I still think the first book I liked the most, maybe. But I'm going to continue on with the series. My necklace keeps moving around, I'm so sorry. My next book, though, is To Sway a Swindler by Megan Charlie. And I have other books by this author on my TBR, and I definitely need to get to them sooner rather than later because I really enjoyed a lot of different aspects of this book. This is a kind of Pied Piper retelling, very loose, but it's kind of like that. And I gave it like 3.5, 4 stars. It's kind of in between the two, but we're gonna go with that. And it was a very fun and pleasant surprise. Basically though, the premise of this book is it is set in a Middle Eastern setting, and our main guy, I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, Assad, maybe, is a con man only because he's got to eat. And so he has a magical pipe that he is able to create hordes of mice. But he also has pet mice and rats and whatnot. I think it's mice. I think they were mice. I don't think they were rats. And so it's a Pied Piper retelling though, and he is able to make villages believe that they are under attack by hordes of mice, and then he appears and it's like, oh, I can get rid of those for you. It was a good con, I have to say. That was a pretty impressive, like I never thought about the Pied Piper being a con man, but that concept worked so well. But then he meets our nosy main character girl, and she kept him on his toes, let's just put it that way. And so she ends up following him and figuring out some things about him, and their friendship grows into more, of course, but she was just like a bubbly delight of a character, and I really liked her. They were just fun. Overall, I thought they were really cute. I didn't quite follow, I think, the magic system well, but that's probably me and my brain. It was overall cute. The ending was a little quick though. I wanted more. I was expecting a little bit more, but it looks like it's connected to another book by this author, so I will definitely have to be getting to that one. Continuing on with my Nancy Drew reread, re-listening, I listened to books 3 and 4 of the Nancy Drew series. So book 3, The Bungalow Mystery, and book 4, The Mystery at Lilac Inn. I remembered a bit about the Bungalow Mystery, like the culprit and whatnot, so it wasn't as exciting for me. I gave it 3.5 stars, still fun. But the Mystery at Lilac Inn, it was one of my favorites when I was younger. So I was really looking forward to rereading this one. I didn't actually remember all the details of this one. And not only is Nancy having to solve what's happening, the mysteries that are happening at Lilac Inn, she also is dealing with an impersonator that apparently looks a lot like her, is not only ruining her reputation, is also stealing stuff from her. And I don't know why this one was one of my favorites growing up, but it was, and I still really enjoyed it. I listened to both of these on Penelope Heaven's channel, and I will link that down below. I think that is the correct title. Yes, Penelope Heaven. She has a bunch of the Nancy Drew stories that she does audiobooks for, and they are so well done. It makes Nancy Drew sound like a Barbie, like from the old Barbie movies, and I just love that so much. Overall, I've been enjoying these. I look forward to continuing my rereads of them and just like enjoying them, because I think I only made it to 40 when I was a kid, 40 something, high 40s. So I'd like to maybe see about continuing on with the series. So I knocked off 2 for this month. We have 3 more books and then we are done with this video. These last 3 books were 3 very, very good books though, so I'm very excited. The first one is Rapunzel's Gambit by Mary Meckham. She said how to pronounce that, and I still struggle, so that's fun. I'm so sorry. But this is her newest book, and she is the author that wrote Assassin of Fire and Sacrifice, which I've talked about a lot, because I was just like flabbergasted by how much I enjoyed it. And then also The Midnight Blizzard, which had a plot twist I also was stunned about. I was able to guess the plot twist in this book. I feel smart. Like, I feel like my IQ just went boop up, and it was great. This is a really loose Rapunzel retelling, where basically the king has told everybody, if you can get rid of the king, not the king, they'd love to get rid of the king. If you can get rid of the dragon that is plaguing their land, you get to marry his daughter, the princess Rapunzel. And she's just like, what now? And so she's not very excited about that. So she stages her own kidnapping and goes and tries to form a partnership with the dragon. Very interesting. She's very cunning, very devious, which is not usually the female main character I like for a book, but I ended up really enjoying a lot of different aspects of this one. I'm very happy I figured out the plot twist though. Like, I feel very smart. Overall, it was very enjoyable. I think if I had to rank the 3 books I've read by her, I don't know if this would be 2 or 3, but Assassin of Fire and Sacrifice I would still say is #1 for me. It was different. I want to talk more about the spoilers for this book. It's not really like a twist I usually like, but it worked out okay. I still have a lot of questions. I need like a follow-up novella or something, but overall it wasn't bad. There was one kiss that was a little much for my taste. So I would say like 16, 17 plus for this book, but there was a lot of banter I enjoyed, and then Rapunzel and the dragon's relationship was interesting. That's all I'm gonna say. It was enjoyable though. I did enjoy this one. I think the cover is just beautiful, but then you have the very creepy, scary dragon up top. So there's that. I'm so excited to talk about this next one. Legacy of Glass by Melanie Sellier. Hi, yes, it's me talking about this series. I'm so excited. So this is book 2 in the Kingdoms of Legacy series. Melanie Sellier's new one. Y'all have been hearing me just rave about Legacy of Roses since December when it released, and then Ties of Legacy, which is book 1.5, came out a couple months ago, and I've been raving about that one as well. And so my poor sweet parents have been hearing me say, I can't wait for May 23rd for months. For months now. And so now it's, I can't wait for August 22nd because that's when book 3 releases, and I'm so excited for this one. Cinderella is a fairy tale I just really enjoyed. If that wasn't obvious by the 1, 2, 3 retellings on this video today. But this is just so fun and so inventive and so creative. If you have not heard my spill about this series, well, let me tell you about this series. Basically, there are 6 kingdoms, and all of their origin stories, their founding history, if you will, is a fairy tale. So in this kingdom, it's Cinderella. And so long time ago, the Cinderella events happened, and now present day, you still have basically the magic that echoes the remains of that curse or the enchantment or the magic in the land. That is what's keeping the land going, basically. And so that's called the legacy, and the legacy is constantly trying to have those events recreate. So unfortunately, that's not like the bestest case for some people. That can affect people by like they're always losing a shoe, but the crown prince, he's great at finding shoes. Or like the mice are as big as horses. There's amazing glass work that comes from this kingdom. So like, you know, very creative, right? And so we have all those elements, but unfortunately for our main girl, Olivia, she's kind of not really become a servant, but kind of a servant to a distant family member. And so the legacy is really putting a lot of power and energy and attention on her. And so she ends up going to the ball wearing glass slippers. There's problems with that, okay? Glass slippers, big deal in Cinderella, right? And so the legacy is putting all this for, wait, does it say that? Yes, okay, it says that. That was not a spoiler. Anyone is allowed to attend the ball as long as they meet a single condition. They must dance in a pair of glass slippers that have made the country famous. Thankfully, Olivia's only friend is willing to lend her a pair, and even the prince chooses her for a dance. It would be a dream come true if he wasn't so irritating. And there's the thing right there. They met prior, did not get off on the right foot, and they kind of just keep walking only on that foot for the next few times they meet. And so there was a little bit of times at the beginning she's very confused because she's not familiar with all like the legacy stuff because she's from the countryside. There's like no power there. In the capital, the power is the strongest because, you know, that's where the royal family lives. And so she's very confused. I was kind of confused. But I reread it and we figured out, like, oh, okay, yeah, I see the problem here. Literally, the problem. And so, in this case, the legacy is pushing them together, but they don't want to be together. They don't think they like each other that way. And it was just, it was fun. It was so much fun, so enjoyable. I will say this is probably one of the cases where I like the plot more than the characters. And usually the characters can make or break a book for me. And so I didn't love them at first because they weren't as smitten as I wanted them to be. Like I was being like the legacy and force, kiss kind of thing. Like, you know, let's have my cute happy romance, right? And they were not having that for the first half at least. So that took a bit of time. So I would say I still liked book 1 and book 1.5 more, but this was still very good. Much needed for the series. Very enjoyable. Cannot wait for book 3. Cannot wait for book 3 because we are finally getting a certain character story and I'm so ready for it. And my last book to talk about today, I'm so glad I talked about it in a couple prior videos from this month because this was actually my first book I read in May. And I think even though I loved Legacy of Glass and Rapunzel's Gambit was also really good, and so was Lessons and What's It. I really liked those, don't get me wrong. But I so enjoyed this one as well, and that was I Wish I May. And I don't know how to pronounce the author's name still. Adlin Berlinstein, perhaps? I'm so sorry, I need to figure out how to say it, because I'm going to be talking about this book for a while. I wanted to give it 4.5 stars. I ended up bumping it down to a 4 for a couple different content little notes, which I'll talk about in a minute. But basically, this is set in a realistic world, but there's magic and fantasy, and there's like this kingdom where there is a school for godmothers in training, and right next to it is a school for like magical engineers and like just like fancy engineer stuff. And so our main girl is a fairy godmother in training, and so life is going good. She's going to become a godmother. She's so excited. Then she gets her first grandchild. No, godchild? Godchild. That's, is that the word? Basically, she gets her first ward, and that ward ends up being the Crown Prince, who is happening to start going to that engineer school that's right next door. So they not only have to work on his wish and what he would like, but they also become friends, and then that leads into more. And honestly, it was kind of reminiscent of Ever After High, if you're familiar with that franchise. But like just an idea of a boarding school for fairy godmothers, I was instantly intrigued, and it was just so much fun. I feel like I rarely have seen anyone talk about this book, and it was just so much fun. I just really, really enjoyed this book so much. I thought it was just so fun. I wanted to have a physical copy, but I am waiting to buy it. I am waiting. I am being good. I'm trying to not spend money, but I do want to get a physical copy of this book. I will say there was a couple comments here and there that I didn't care for that made me drop my rating from a 4.5 to a 4. And then I will say that Zelda and Leo, the main couple, they do cuddle a little bit much in each other's rooms at times for my taste. And like nothing goes beyond that, but that brought in temptation for them, and I don't really like that. And it's awkward at first, and it doesn't go past much, but it was just a wee bit much in my taste. So, like, you know, that's there. Had it been toned down a bit more and not had a couple other random comments, I would have probably given this one a 5 star. I really did enjoy a lot of different aspects of it, and just so many different parts. It was just really fun, really enjoyable. But I will give the nuance and the warning that there are just a few little things I didn't love, unfortunately. It was a wee bit, I think, kissy or touchy, maybe for a YA book for my standards and my taste. Compared to, like, you know, the mainstream world, it's probably very, very clean compared to those. But for, like, my taste and what I recommend to y'all, I will give the warning. It was a little much for my taste at times. So take of that how you will. Overall, I did enjoy it, and I will definitely be getting a copy, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the series. It sounds like the next book is actually going to be his parents' story, which I wasn't interested in, but then the more I thought about it, the more I think I am interested in reading, because there is interesting things that have happened in this book that makes me more curious about their stories, so we will see. And that, my dear friends, is the end of this video. I talked y'all's ear off. Hopefully this video is not 2 hours long. I hope it's not 2 hours long, but this is my stack of books. Let's show them. Ta-da! Very good. So obviously I'm not keeping All the Pretty Places or The Unlikely Intrusions of Adams Klein. I won't be keeping those. I think I'm keeping the rest. Yes, I'm keeping the rest. And then as far as books I want to get, obviously I Wish I May. The Emily Daddy series, I want to wait and finish when the last book releases in August, and then I'm going to debate if I'll buy those. Sarah Brand, I'm also going to wait and see about that series. And then the Annabelle Raven, what was it, Elves and Legends series, I'm going to finish the series and see what I think. So I don't think really, like, there's not any ones that are, like, in my cart ready for me to hit by now. I'm going to wait for those series to end and see what I think about them. But that is my recent reads for May. 25 books. Not too shabby. Not too shabby. So that is it for this video, though. I hope you enjoyed it. I'd love to know if you've read any of these. Do you want to read any of these? Did any of them catch your eye? I love hearing from y'all in the comments, so thank you so much. I feel like I had a decent mix of genres maybe in this video. Still heavy on the fairy tale retellings because that's what I'm reading lately. I don't know. There's just something about them that's just like fun and enjoyable and just fun. I haven't found more books like Melanie Sellier's that I've really enjoyed besides Deborah Grace White's. I was going to start one of her fantasy series that's not a fairy tale retelling, Deborah Grace White's Heir of the Curse. I was going to read that one because it's on my summer list, but then I saw it was 500 pages, and I was like, well, I'm going to have to wait on that one. Gonna have to wait till I can read that for a couple days. So, we'll see. Hopefully I'll have some more fantasy books coming up, but that is my stack. Those were the books I read in May, and I'd love to hear from y'all in the comments. As always, there are links, full content review links to all of these books down below, and I will see y'all next time. Thank you so much for watching. I am Lindsay from the blog booksforchristiangirls.blogspot.com, where there is a new review every Wednesday and Friday. I try to post a new video on this channel every Friday. I am also on Instagram under Books for Christian Girls, where I talk only about Christian fiction. And then Book Reviews by Lindsay is kind of my more personal bookstagram, and I talk about Christian fiction, clean fiction, and just like what I'm reading, what I'm up to, my monthly trackers, all of that is on that account. I am also on TikTok, Goodreads, and Facebook, and I also have a newsletter, so feel free to sign up for that. I'll link that down below as well if I can, and I will see y'all next time. I hope y'all have an absolutely lovely rest of your day. Bye!